everyone, Mr. Rogers here. Today we're going to be talking about how to compare decimals using fractions. So in this video, we're going to be comparing decimals using three different ways that you can use to help you. So the first way I'm going to show you is the normal way that you would look at how to compare decimals. So I'm going to give you two decimals and we're going to look at the place values and compare the decimals based on the numbers in each place value. The second way that I'll show you how to compare decimals is using the fraction form of that decimal. And then the last way I'll show you is how to compare decimals using a base 10 hundredths block. Okay, so let's get started. So before we get started, let's do a quick recap on what comparing is. Okay, so when I tell you or you hear that you're comparing two numbers, so it could be whole numbers, it could be decimals or fractions, all comparing is you're just looking for the biggest place value. So you're going to be looking at the value that's in each place value or the number that's in each place value, and you're going to find the number that has the greatest place value. Okay, so when you have whole numbers or decimals, or you could turn fractions into the decimal, you're going to start with the greatest place value. Okay, then you're going to work your way over to the smallest place value. Okay, that will make sense when I get into an example in a second. Okay, so the three things that you need to know in this video is greater than, less than, and equal to. So I'm going to put my symbols up here. I have greater than, I have less than, and equal to. Okay, so obviously the easiest symbol that I have on my board that you're going to remember like automatically is equal to. Okay, greater than and less than are the two symbols that like to trick everyone. Okay, the way I remember greater than and less than is, if you notice right here, so I have my greater than first and less than. If I look at my less than right here, you notice there is like an L shape. Okay, the L is just kind of turned a little bit. What I think of that, I think of less. Okay, so I know my less than sign or less than symbol is my less than because it has the L shape that's just turned a little bit. If you look at greater than, you can't really put an L on that because it's a backwards L, and that doesn't make sense. Okay, and when we use greater than or less than, the mouth points to the bigger number. So the alligator is going to eat the bigger number. Okay, that will make sense when I get into a couple of examples here in a second. So let's dive in. Okay, so let's do a quick recap or a quick review on comparing with whole numbers. So if I give you the numbers 751, I want you to compare that to 343. What you're going to have to start doing is looking at each place value or each number that's in each place value. So when we have two numbers and we're comparing them, we start with the greatest place value and work our way over to the smallest. So our greatest place value in this case is our hundredths number. So we have 7 in the hundredths over here and 3 in the hundredths place value over here. 7 is greater than 3. So 751 is greater than 343. Okay, that's how we do that. Let's go into some examples with decimals. Okay, so the first way I'm going to show you how to compare decimals is doing the normal way. Okay, so we're going to look at each place value and go from there. So if I give you the example 65 hundredths, now I want you to compare that to 43 hundredths. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to do is start in the greatest place value. So in this case, our greatest place value is our ones place value. So this is the number to the left of the decimal sign. Okay, because in a decimal we have ones. That is the number to the left of the decimal, and then the numbers to the right of the decimal starts with tenths and then hundredths. Okay, so in this case, our ones is our greatest place value. And in both of these numbers, we have 0. So 0 over here, 0 over here. That's not going to help me because I can't compare them because they have the same number in the ones. So we have to move over to my tenths. So over here, I have a 6 in my tenths, and I have a 4 in my tenths. Well, I know 6 is greater than 4, so that means 65 hundredths is greater than 43 hundredths because 6 is greater than 4. Okay, so let's look at another example on how to compare decimals using like the place value. Okay, so if I give you the example 48 hundredths, and I want you to compare, let me make that a little bigger. I'm using this circle because that's usually what we use when we want to compare two numbers. I want you to compare that to 53 hundredths. Okay, so let's start in our greatest place value, which is our ones place value, and we have a 0 over here and a 0 over here. Then if I move over to my tenths, because I need to keep going to be able to compare them, I have a 4 in my tenths and a 5 in my tenths. Well, I know 4 is less than 5, so in this case, 48 hundredths is going to be less than 53 hundredths. Okay, so let's move into the second way that I'm going to show you on how to compare decimals. Okay, so if I give you the example 4 hundredths, and I want you to compare that to 38 hundredths, we're going to be looking at the fraction form of these numbers now. Okay, so remember when we convert decimals to fractions, all that we do, we put our number that we see after the decimal point for our numerator. So if I look at 4 hundredths right here, I'm going to bring my 4 down right here. And if I look at how many place values I have after the decimal, I have tenths and hundredths. So my 4 is going to be the numerator of hundredths. Okay, so all I did was I brought my number I see, I put that in my numerator, and then I looked at my place values that's after the decimal points, and I had tenths and hundredths. Hundredths goes underneath. That's my denominator. Okay, so let's look at my second number. So I have 38 hundredths. I'm going to bring my 38 down to my numerator. And then I'm going to look at how many place values I have after my decimal point. That's going to be my denominator. So I have tenths, hundredths. So it's going to be the same thing. 38 being brought down to the numerator and hundredths being my denominator because I have two place values after my decimal point. So now I have 4 hundredths and 38 hundredths. Well, now I can clearly see what I have. Okay, I'm going to be looking at my numerators and which one has the greatest value. So 4 is less than 38, so I know 4 hundredths is less than 38 hundredths. Okay, let's look at another example using the fraction form so I can make sure you all know what you're doing. So if I give you the example 75 hundredths, and I want you to compare that to 65 hundredths. Okay, let's convert these decimals into fractions. Okay, so my first decimal, 75 hundredths, I'm going to bring my 75 down because that's the number I see. So 75, and then my denominator is going to be the place values that I see after the decimal. I have two place values after the decimal, and that second place value is hundredths because I have tenths and hundredths. So my denominator is going to be hundredths. Okay, let's look at my second number, 65 hundredths. Okay, I'm going to bring 65 down because that's my numerator because that's the number I see. Then I'm going to figure out the place value that is my last place value after the decimals. So I have tenths, hundredths, so I'm going to put hundredths in my denominator. Now I can clearly see these numbers to represent which one is bigger. I have 75 hundredths and 65 hundredths. When you see a number over hundreds, think of pennies because it takes 100 pennies to make $1. In this case, I have 75 pennies and 65 pennies. I want to have the greatest amount of pennies to help me get to $1. So 75 is greater than 65. So in this case, 75 hundredths is greater than 65 hundredths. Okay? Now, let's look at our last way on how to compare decimals. Okay? And this way we're going to be using a hundredths block. Okay, so in this example, we're kind of combining way 2 into way 3. Okay, so I'm going to have to use the fraction form to be able to get me to my hundredths block. Okay, so let's do an example. So if I give you the example 16 hundredths, well, hang on. Yeah, let's do 16 hundredths. I was about to give you the fraction form to it. Don't want to do that yet. And 23 hundredths. Okay, to be able to do this, I need to have my fraction form to be able to put that into my hundredths block. Okay, so let's convert these decimals into fractions real fast. So again, the number that you see is the numerator. So my first number, 16 hundredths, my 16 is my numerator, and then hundredths is my place value that I see after my decimals. So I'm going to put 16 over 100, and I want to compare that to 23 hundredths. So I'm going to bring my 23 down. Hundredths is my last place value after my decimals, so I'm going to put that over 100. So now I'm going to look at 16 hundredths and 23 hundredths. So if I get my hundredths blocks up here, okay, I'm taping them onto my board so you can see. Might be a little hard to see. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to take my fraction form of these decimals and I'm going to fill it into my hundredths block. Okay, so I'm going to grab a marker. Okay, so my 16 hundredths, okay, when I look at this number, I'm going to reference back my decimal first to explain this to you. In this 16 hundredths, I have 1/10 and 6 hundredths. So what that 1 tells me, 1/10 is just a group of 10. So I'm just going to shade this group of 10 down here. Okay, that's all that 10 tells me. It's just a group of 10. Okay, so now the 6 in my 16 hundredths, that 6 just shows me there's 6 extra pieces now. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to shade 6 pieces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this right here, this hundredths block shows you what 16 hundredths represent. Okay, so I have one group of 10 that's shaded in and then 6 extra pieces. Okay, let's look at the second decimal now. Now I have 23 hundredths. Okay, so I have a 2 in my tenths and a 3 in my hundredths. That 2 tells me there's 2 groups of 10. So I'm just going to shade in two groups of 10. Okay, I just shaded in 2 columns. Okay, that 3 tells me there's just 3 extra pieces. So I'm going to shade in 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this right here represents 23 hundredths. All right, so when I look at my hundredths block, I clearly can see 23 hundredths has more shaded in compared to 16 hundredths. So if I go back up here, 16 hundredths is less than 23 hundredths. You can look at your fraction form, 16 is less than 23, and if you look at your hundredths block, 23 has more shaded in. So that means 16 hundredths is less than 23 hundredths. Okay, let's do one more example with this to make sure that you know what to do. Okay. Okay, I'm going to change markers because that was kind of bleeding on the board. So I'm going to get a highlighter. Okay, so now our problem is going to be, let's do this. Let's do 6/10, and I'm going to try to trick you on this one. And 60 hundredths. Okay, if you look at this problem, you could already know I'm trying to trick you with this problem. Okay, but if you don't know I'm trying to trick you right off the bat, let's work through it to get to know this problem. So if I was to compare these right here, okay, I want to compare them using the method of using our hundredths block. Okay, so I need to convert these decimals into its fractions form. Okay, so with this one, I'm going to bring my 6 down. Now, if I look right here, my place value after my decimal is tenths. So it's going to be 6/10. Okay, over here, I'm going to bring my 60 down for my numerator, and hundredths is my last place value I see, so I'm going to put 60 over 100. Okay, now if I want to use my hundredths block, I'm taping up the hundredths block on my board so you can see it. Okay, so let's look at this. If you notice though, before we move into our hundredths block, our denominators are different. I have tenths over here and hundreds over here. Okay, if I look at this, I'm not going to be able to use 6/10 to put it in a hundredths block because I need to have a denominator of 100. This 60 hundredths is easy to put in a hundredths block because it has a denominator of 100. So what I need to do with 6/10, I'm going to move it over to the left a little. I need to convert to a denominator of 100. Okay, and if I know tens, if I work with tens and I try to get a denominator of hundreds, I know I just have to multiply by 10. So I'm going to multiply my numerator and denominator by 10 to give me the common denominator of 100. So if you look, 6 times 10 is 60, then 10 times 10 is 100. You see how I'm trying to trick you now? Because now I have 60 hundredths and 60 hundredths. So let's work this problem out. So if I have 60 hundredths and 60 hundredths, when I go to fill it into my hundredths chart, now I'm going to look at my 60 hundredths and 60 hundredths. Okay, so this tells me there's 60 groups of 100 colored in. So that just means I'm going to shade in 6 columns. So ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All I did was I shaded in 6 groups of the 100, okay, or 60 pieces out of 100, okay. So in this case, I have 60 pennies, okay. Now let's look at our second number, 60 hundredths again. So that just means I'm going to color in 6 groups of 100 or 60 pieces, okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay? And if you look at both of these examples, they show the same amount being shaded in. I have 6 groups out of 10 shaded in, or 60 pieces. Okay, so that means 6/10 and 60 hundredths are equal. Okay? I tried to trick you on that problem. Okay, I hope this video helped you guys with comparing decimals using place value, comparing it using place value, using the fraction form, or the third case I did was using the hundredths block. Until next time, see you later.